Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cape Town Marathon podcast. This is episode 3, and we are officially 12 weeks out from race date as of today, which is super, super exciting. We hope you enjoyed the past 2 episodes. Now we're looking at really dialing in to sort of what we would call the official marathon training. But for today, before we get into all of the sort of golden pieces of information, Ntutu, I am joined here by Coach Ntutu today, and I'm Jamie Hutting, more of your host. And we just like to say hello. We hope everything's going well in your training. And with that, Ntutu, how are things going?
Hi, Jamie, and great to be back. And I do hope, as you said, that everyone has enjoyed the first 2 episodes, and we are on episode 3. And finally, I suppose, getting going with training. On my end, things are good. It's nice and summery out here in the UK. Probably not as hot as the Southern summer, but it's still quite toasty some days. So it's making training quite a challenge. I'm in what you would call summer-based training. I'm building up to my goals. My main goal is a marathon next year. So this time for me is building up volume and getting fit and ready after a bit of a break. But it's challenging. So training through summer is tough, but everything is good and going well. And on your end?
Oh no, everything's going well on my side. I'm not necessarily training for anything in particular, and as I'm still relatively beginner, I'd like to say I'm still recovering from my first half. But it feels like it was a while ago now, but sort of not necessarily training for anything in particular, just sort of carrying on. I'd say, like you say, you're always training, but
Yeah.
right now it's not nothing in particular that I'm working towards. But for today, getting to the business side of things, what we'll be chatting about, just to sort of organize or structure the podcast episode for today, we'll be chatting about training advice for sort of runners of all levels, whether it's maybe your first marathon or you are very experienced with the distance. We'll also be chatting about batches and seeding, and then how to fit races into your training schedule. So you might have a few races, or maybe not a few, you might have 1 or 2 on the calendar before Cape Town Marathon in October. So we'll be chatting around how to fit those in and not disrupt training too much. So from episode 1, we've been speaking about, where you needed to have been before getting into the official training. But now, 12 weeks out, it's generally when most people will start their real marathon block. And so we'll be chatting more about that in detail today. So now that we are starting the so called official training in Tutu, what advice do you have for runners that are getting into that from this week onwards?
So just following on from the last episode, we spoke about how to adapt to missed training. And what we said there was that your training wouldn't be 100% compliant, and that's fine. What we want to see is you getting in most of your training. So one of our pillars of training here at Coach Perry is that consistency is key. It is one of the most important aspects. It doesn't help if you one week do, a 10K here in a long run, next week do your interval session, but don't do anything else, and maybe do like a spin on the bike and do strength session. You want to be consistent week in, week out, getting in most of your sessions, especially the key ones, the long run, any interval training you're going to do. So that's the first thing, is you need to be consistent. You only improve as a runner when you turn up. If you're not turning up, you're not improving. So
Of
the
course.
goal is to ensure that uh, as you build your training volume and you're consistent, you will find that training gets more comfortable. Marathon training is hard, but as you turn up and do all the sessions, you will find yourself adapting to the training. And that's what we want to see over the 12 weeks. So be consistent, show up and turn up, and I promise you will start to see those improvements across the 12-week plan.
Yes. I mean, it might not feel like that initially, but with time and consistency and a bit of patience, you'll get there.
Yeah. And then in terms of consistency, now, how do you stay consistent? Because of course, that's just a word. I'm telling you to do this thing, but there's going to be a strategy for you to get there. And I think the main thing, and we'll talk about this as we talk about the different sessions you do, as we go through the weeks, we'll focus on certain aspects, but just globally overall with your training, I think what is really important is focusing on the intensity of your training. So what I mean by that is that we want you to train at the correct intensity. I think often when people see a plan and you've got like a run at, I don't know, 6:30 a K, people see that as a challenge. Like, that we're giving you a target to beat on the day. We are not. What we're saying to you is that in order for you to build the appropriate fitness, we need you to be there. And there's different ways
Yeah.
to gauge intensity. Like pace is a very easy way to. So I'll use pace normally when I'm talking, but we can use heart rate and other aspects. And what we like is perceived intensity or running by feel, perceived exertion, sorry, and running by feel. But that's the main thing, is that you need to focus on the intensity and don't be tempted to speed up your runs. Anyone can run faster. That's easy to do. But the key thing is staying consistently at those correct intensities. And the reason you do that is because the other thing that is so important and what we really want to focus on, and we've spoken about this before, is recovery.
Yes.
Your fitness gains happen during recovery, not during your actual training session. Your training sessions break you down, you introduce a stimulus, you challenge your body to improve. And when you recover, when you sleep, when you take in nutrition, that's when your body is recovering. And then when you recover, your body adapts and says, oh, I can protect myself from when I see this thing again. And then that's how
Mm.
you improve.
Yeah.
And part of that is managing that intensity of the runs. And the main thing where people fall apart is the easy runs, because people see
Yeah.
them, because you have a 1 hour run in your plan, and that's an easy spot for you to just run a little bit faster because you think running faster is making you fitter. It's not.
Mm.
Running faster
Yeah.
is just making you more tired. It's introducing more fatigue. You're increasing your training load. Running faster works your muscles more. There's eccentric loading as you run. You're using more power to run faster. So you're working your muscles harder. And all you're doing is just delaying recovery.
Yeah. And
So,
I don't think there's actually that much more gain that you're getting from that, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, so I personally don't think so. I think sometimes people do think, they look at that and they think, oh, if I'm running at 6:30 a K and I'm running at 6:15 a K, 6:15 must be better. But like I
Mm.
said, there's a cost to everything. So when you run faster, you're working your body harder, you're using up more resources, and then you're delaying recovery. So in the long term, when you look at building training over weeks and weeks and weeks, running your runs that little bit easier. I don't like using the word slow. I think slow has a very negative connotation, but running
I
easier
agree.
allows you to
Mm.
be able to do more work. And it's stacking
Yeah.
on the work week on week on week. That's how you get fitter. So please don't be tempted to gain time here, run a bit faster, do that extra K in training, just work at the correct intensities. The places in your training plan have been designed around your goals. So if you've on a 4.5 hour plan, we've thought very much about what paces you need to run for you to be able to get the correct stimulus, but also be able to recover from your sessions and be able to go on and do the sessions you need. Because the focus really is that you want to be able to do your interval sessions well, and you want to be able to do your long runs well, and fit in your strength training. All that is
Yes.
important. But if you're fatigued from your runs, you're not going to want to do any more training. And that's when the
No.
inconsistency comes in. So these points all lead on. So be consistent, and you're consistent by managing intensity, because all of this is affecting your recovery.
Of course. No, very, very wise words there, Ntutu. So thanks for sharing. I think overall, it sounds like you need to be following a plan. And with that, as of this week onwards, you might see in the description box for those listening from elsewhere, maybe from home or driving in the car. In our description link, we do have our training plans. If you'd like to have a look at those, we do have them available for runners of all levels. But in terms of following a plan in Tutu, it sounds obviously quite important as much as the consistency is. But is there anything that you'd like to highlight around following a plan?
So, I mean, as we mentioned in the first episode, you need to choose a plan that's appropriate to you. So by now, I hope that you have that when you're starting now, that you're not winging your training, because you can't wing 12 marathon training. So use, as we explained in the first episode, use your race times over 5K, 10K, and so on. Now you know sort of where you are. So let's say you've chosen you want to do a 4.5 hour marathon. So our training plans have everything from finishes, sub 5, sub 4:30, all the way down to sub 3 hour marathon. So you'll know where you are, and you pick a plan that's sort of where you want to be. And that plan gives you direction. You know, I've said, and I'll keep reiterating, I don't expect you all to do every single session 100%. Life will happen. You might get sick. You might need to go away for work. But for the most part, that plan gives you direction. And without that direction, you will just be doing whatever comes at you, and you're not going to be progressively building towards your goal. So pick a plan, and the measure of success of a training plan is sticking to a plan. So, a lot of people start doing something and then halfway through, they're like, oh, I don't like this. I'm going to do that plan. I don't like that. I'll do this plan. So please, when you pick a plan, stick to it for the 12 weeks. That's how you get the most benefit out of it. And like I said, that plan gives you direction. And
Yeah.
the key thing is knowing when your sessions are coming up. Because I think with marathon training, in any training, but in particularly marathon training, you are going to be doing a lot more running for most people than you have before, especially if
Hmm.
you are someone who's come from a 5K, 10K background and hasn't done a marathon before. If it's your first marathon, you're going to find the training volume is going to increase. It has to, because your long runs will be longer and most of your sessions are going to be longer. You might, if you're running 4 or 5 times a week, do a midweek long run. We often put a longer run on a Thursday. That's also there to help endurance. So you're doing a lot more training than you have before. And having that plan in front of you, knowing what you're doing, helps you to plan ahead and know, just planning for sessions. I think knowing, and this is things like routes.
Yeah.
I think having that planning ahead of time, being able to select where you're going to be running, and for a lot of people that might be time, if you're running in the morning or late in the evening, safety comes into it. So knowing where you're going to be, so all of this stuff is really, really important for you to get going. And then, and also just knowing the time allocated to you, and just to know what's ahead. You don't want any nasty surprises when you get to week 8 and you've got a 3.5 hour long one. You're like, where did this turn up from? You know what I mean? So the plan really is the foundation of what you're going to be doing, but you need to choose a plan that is appropriate for you. Don't shoot
Yes.
for the stars. You need to be realistic about what you can, and once you've done that, that's a good start. And again, we spoke about consistency. When you've got a plan, you're more likely to be consistent. When you've got a plan,
Yes.
you're more likely to follow the right prescriptions, which means you're going to be able to work in that recovery as planned. When we build the plans,
Yeah.
we are very deliberate about where we try and put sessions. Of course, things are flexible, but there are rules that we have. Like if you've got 2 speed sessions, which rarely happens, but if you do, don't do back-to-back speed sessions, that sort of thing. Don't do a long run and then try and fit in a second session during the day. But the plan will tell you all of that, and so that's very, very important.
No,
And then,
definitely.
yeah, I know, and then for planning, like I said, for long runs, I think one of the things that I sort of like, how do you get in the long runs? Once you know you've got this progression of long runs on the weekend, you can look around, and it's things like finding groups to train with. You can train with a lot of the running clubs in South Africa will have planned long runs for the weekends, because a lot of people are training for these races. And there are other options, and I think we're going to talk about this, like maybe using races for training. Races are a way
Yeah.
for you to safely get in the miles, the volume that you need, and the benefit there is that you'll have all the nutrition and things available to you.
Yeah.
So the training plan really is a key thing to have in place, and at this point in time, you need to have chosen a plan, and a plan that you're going to stick to for the 12 weeks as you build towards race day.
Of course. I think something that we have highlighted in the previous episodes is, although we are 12 weeks out, it is a lot of time, but it goes by faster than you think.
Yeah.
And you might have even started, if it's your first marathon, you might have done a program to build up over 12 weeks before starting the marathon plan itself. And so that is good practice. And looking ahead, as you said, as to what is to come, so that nothing is a big surprise later on, is so important. I remember looking out at the start of my half marathon plan, and there was a 3-hour run scheduled. And I thought, oh my word, I don't have somewhere to run for 3 hours. And I spent about 4 weeks exploring the area to see, okay, where can I run for 3 hours? That's not just a continuous loop. So it for sure keeps you busy, even if, I mean, that kept me busy apart from the training itself. But speaking about,
Can I just say
yes,
something? You speak about training loops. When I was training for my marathon, I got bored of running along the canals in London and going out and back. So I actually did my runs as in a 6K loop around the park close to where I stayed. So I would go out
wow,
there and literally go and do 2.5 hours running around the loop. But the reason I chose that wasn't accidental. It was because in the park, there are water fountains around the park. So I could stop and fill up I ran with the hydration pack, so I could stop and fill it up.
Yes.
And also there were bathrooms. And I think
Oh,
running,
100%.
no,
No,
exactly. So
strategic.
yeah, so it's those little things that come into planning for what you do. And I chose that park. Well, I knew the park very well. It was flat, and
Mm,
my marathon was mostly flat, so it was quite representative of what I was going to be doing, and just having those things available to me. So it's all those things that come into it, and knowing what's ahead
yeah.
helps you make those plans and put them in concretely.
Of course, it makes training a little bit more fun as well, that you're not just miserably going about the same route or anything like that.
Yeah,
But speaking of, fun and around training and racing, some people might have really gotten that bug that's bitten them and they want to enter races now before Cape Town Marathon. So we might just chat a little bit on that. I mean, speaking of locally, just within the next week, there's a Skukuza half marathon coming up, I think, next weekend, the 2nd of August. So,
yeah.
I mean, for those that might be running Skukuza, I believe I haven't run it myself, but the course is quite undulating and apparently has a few steep climbs and dips. I mean, the half marathon itself, the distance isn't just exactly like, around the block. So it does have some sort of effect afterwards. And of course, depending how hard you race it. But how does one incorporate, such races, not necessarily just half marathons, but how do you incorporate races, especially if you might be someone that really struggles with, feeling sore and tired after races?
Can I just add one thing about Scusa? If I remember correctly, it's also a night race. So I think that's something that people must think about. So I think it's one of the few
Oh, I wasn't
long night
aware.
races. But I don't know if that's changed since I've moved from South Africa, but I remember before I've had friends who run it. So it's a lovely race, but it's a challenging route, and it does have that little
Mm,
factor of a night race. So if you aren't used to racing at night, that's something, or in the evening, that's something to think about. Um, so in terms of races, look, people enjoy races. Races are fun. Races are a good way to test yourself. There's the camaraderie, the spirit, all of that stuff is really great. But I think what we also always need to keep in mind is, what is your long-term goal? And
mm,
when we are looking to add races to the training plan, you want to do it in a smart way. Um, Always, again, your goal race is the thing that drives what you do in the training. So like I said, we build your plan, and the plan progresses towards the end goal based on, you want to run a marathon on October 19th. That's what you're building towards.
yeah.
So when you want to add races in, you've got to be very strategic about it and be very thoughtful about how you're going to be using those races to achieve what you want to get towards your
Mm,
goals. So if a race doesn't fit into your goals, it's not worth putting it in, but there are ways to do it. And I think I want to sort of touch on 3 different ways that races can become part of your plan, or what you can do with races. So you can race them all out. And we call them tune-up races, and you can do them as time trials or this sort of thing. And remember, we spoke about how we can use your race times to predict your marathon finish.
yeah.
A well-placed race in your marathon plan is a good way to test once you've done a block of training. So you don't just want to do it in week one and say, oh, I'm going to go out and smash a half marathon in week one. But once you've built in a block of training and you've built in some work, it's a good way to test to make sure that you're on the right track with your goal. So if I've set myself a goal of running 4 hours for the marathon, I could schedule a half marathon at some point along the way. And that can tell me if I'm on the right track. If
Yeah.
I've chosen a goal that is appropriate, and if I'm training and responding to training well enough that I can still meet my goal. So
Yeah.
that's a good way to use races. But the one thing about this is that when you race hard, even over 5K, you need to factor in recovery. Um,
Yeah.
so you said how 12 weeks is a lot of time, but the time flies by as well. So if you are going to be adding hard all-out races into your training plan, you firstly are going to be training a lot, so you need to freshen up. So you'll do a little bit of a taper for the race.
Mm,
Then once you've run the race, you need to factor in recovery from that race so that you don't start training and you are sore and stiff and tired and probably risk injuring yourself.
of
So
course.
Jeremy, you're looking at sacrificing. Sacrifice is not the best word, but you'll have to allocate 10 to 14 days, combining the time
Yeah.
before and after the race, to allow you to freshen up for the race and then to recover for it afterwards to be able to continue. And that's where
Yeah.
timing of the races becomes critical. That I wouldn't be comfortable seeing people still running races 2 weeks out from race day. If you're
No.
out running a hard half marathon at the end of September, beginning of October, that's way too close to race day, and you're going to find yourself struggling. You're going to have the taper, but you've now loaded yourself with a whole bunch of fatigue and muscle soreness very, very close to race day. So you've got to factor in the recovery for races, and then you've also got to factor in the timing of the races. So for recovery wise, 5K, 1 to 2 days, most people with experience can recover very quickly from a 5K. A 10K, 2 to 3 days for experienced runners, might be 3 to 5 days for beginners, but that's 3 to 5 days of easy running, not taking time off. And for a half marathon, this is like, I think the half marathon is probably the most disrespected race distance in the world. It's not a marathon, so no one takes time off. And it's not as hard as a 10K, so it's not as intense. But you really you are factoring in 3 to 5 days recovery after a half marathon, maybe 5 to 7 days if you are very new to running. And that can just be easy running, but essentially you're going to have to devote a block of time after your half marathon to recover. So that week after your half marathon is going to be a week where you won't be getting much marathon training in. So
No.
that's what you've got to think. You've got to think about. So in terms of where to put them in, you can probably do a 5K and 10K up to about 4 weeks out from race day. I wouldn't do one in the last 4-week block, just simply because that's when you're now really, really focused on getting yourself ready for race day. So I'd say 4 to 6 weeks or so for a 5K or a 10K. And for a half marathon, I wouldn't do one closer than 6 weeks to race day. It's just too much recovery time, too much in time leading in with that mini taper you've got to put in. So there you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks for an all-out half marathon. So essentially 4 to 8 weeks, that's the window in your training plan where you want to be considering doing races. And I wouldn't do more than 1 or 2 races in the training block. One will be enough.
Yeah.
The half marathon will tell you more about where you are prepared for a marathon, but a 10K is also a very good indicator. So don't just think you need to go longer all the time. You also need to think about your experience, like we said, how sore you get. And a 10K is hard, but you can recover from it quicker than a half marathon. So think about all those considerations. So that's how you use races as all-out races, and then you can use races to replace training. And by
Yes.
this I mean, so you're not going out and racing hard, but you're using it in substitution of a session. So you can do sessions. If you've got an interval session, a 5K is often a good replacement for like what we call VO2 max training. So those are like, 400s, 800s that you're doing training for, and that'll be more for sort of the advanced runners. You can also use a 5K and a 10K as a tempo run if you do have tempo runs in your schedule. And some of our plans will have, as you get more advanced, we have what we call tempo intervals, where you might do a few 1K repeats at around marathon pace, and then like a long block of like 3 or 4Ks, just also at the same pace. So a 5K or a 10K slowed down at that pace is a good way to do those, and you do those as sort of tempo runs. For really advanced runners, we can often use a half marathon as a marathon pace training session. We don't give this out to everyone. You have to be experienced. You have to be used to running, because this is still going to be a long session. Even for a 3-hour marathon runner, if they do a half marathon at marathon pace, that's still an hour and a half of running. Warm up and cool down. It's almost a 2-hour session. So you be very, very careful about these runs. It looks good on paper, but
Yeah.
it's basically a long run, with most of it being done at marathon pace. So that's not something we want to prescribe to a lot of people unless you have a lot of experience running. But you can use races of different distances to replace different sessions in your plans, and that means you still do them at the paces prescribed, but you just use them
Yeah.
to do that. But then I think the way that people mostly use races as training runs is to replace long runs, because as we spoke about earlier, it's hard to find a route that's, if you're doing a 3.5-hour long run, that can be a lot of road to cover, and it's hard to plan, and then you don't have access to bathrooms, to portaloos, to water, to gels,
Yeah.
means carrying stuff. So races as long runs can be a very useful thing. What I want people to consider here is that be very careful about doing marathons as long runs, particularly for Cape Town. We don't need to run the marathon distance in training to prepare for the marathon. Your preparation is the balance of all your training. We're not trying to replicate your race in training. We're preparing you to be able to run the race that you do, and we do it by building it in pieces. We're building it
Yeah.
week on week on week on week on week, and we're stacking sessions on. That's how we get to where you need to be. So half marathons are very good for a lot of people. A half marathon at a long run pace will get you 2.5 hours or so running. Maybe up to 30K races can be good. And again, there's nothing magical about doing a 20 mile or a 32K in training. In fact, we prescribe our long runs by time, specifically to get people away from obsessing about hitting a specific race distance in training. It's the time spent on feet that is the stimulus for these runs. So you can use those runs. If you've got a 1 hour run, you might do a 10K race and use it to replace an hour run. But this is so important. When you're doing these runs as training runs, you have to be very, very disciplined and actually run them at the correct pace. Don't line up on them on the day and get sucked in with the wave and the euphoria of the race day and then end up going out and running a hard pace. Yeah. So as long as you are disciplined, like I know I'm not. I've never been able to get it right. I've never been able, unless I'm pacing someone and someone has asked me to run at a certain pace for them. If I'm on my own, I know I can't do it. So I don't do my long runs and races, and that's a me thing. It doesn't mean that other people can't do it, but I know a lot of people safely do it. And the thing is, it's about being consistent and being disciplined. That's pretty much, that covers how to incorporate races into your training plan.
Of course. I think, with using them as training runs, it's so important to be disciplined. I mean, when I want to do a 5K, PB, I go and do a park run. There's something about running with other people that
exactly.
I don't know if it's maybe because I'm competitive, but it's just actually quite magical how you do naturally run better. So I can only imagine doing, training runs in big races. It's hard.
It's challenging.
But
It is hard. And
again, discipline.
So I just take discipline.
So as a question onto that, Ntutu, we mentioned speaking about batches and seeding. So I know, for big marathons that they'll ask you for a marathon time, and some people might not have a marathon time to provide to help them, with that start. But some people might want to go and do a marathon in order to provide a marathon time that will maybe help them have a better placement in their start. So what would you, I guess, say to those people that might want to run a marathon in their preparation in order to get a recent time?
So one thing to remember about Cape Town Marathon, it's not like Two Oceans or Comrades where you have to qualify for, like Boston, for example. You've got to run a Boston qualifier. There's no qualifying time. So anyone can enter. As long as you get an entry, you're fine. So you don't have to go out and try and run a sub 5, sub 4, sub 3 to get your place in the start. When you've got your place, you've got your place, and that's that, and you're in. So don't worry too much about that part of it. You're not going to lose your place if you don't run a marathon time. There's no qualifying. So what these races do, a race like Cape Town uses, they still use a seeding system. So you provide, if you've run a marathon before, you provide a recent marathon. You can also provide predicted times. So of course, if you've been doing a whole bunch of training and you know that you are aiming for 4-hour marathon, that qualifies. And for those who don't have a target time, you end up in the last batches. So what they do is you get seeded into batches. And in the last couple of years, they've had quite a extensive batches, and they'll announce them closer to race days. So it's not always the same. It depends on how many runners run, and again, those times provided. So it'll be like I think the one year it was A to Z, actually.
Wow.
So and then they at least get their own start, and then everyone else is broken up into these different seeding batches. And then on race day itself, the race goes in waves. So I'm not sure exactly what time the race starts, and I feel like I should have looked this up before we started recording. But it was 6:15 before. So the race starts at 6:15. The leads go off, and then the waves come quite quickly, and then all the different batches will start in different ways. So, and if I recall, in 2023, everyone got through from 6:15. The last batch went to 7:07. So you all go off when you do. The important thing about Cape Town is that, unlike Comrades, where it starts at a certain time and ends at a certain time, and that's like your 12-hour window. And I know this year they had 2 starts, but each batch had that 12 hours. Your time starts when you cross the start line. So it's mat to mat. It's mat to mat. So you start, and then when you get to the end, that's recorded time. And the cutoff time is 6.5 hours. And if you start in the last batch, your 6.5 hours didn't start at 16:15. It starts when your batch starts. So that's not an
Yeah.
issue in terms of you will have your 6.5 hours to run your race. So don't worry too much about that. And so people might be tempted to go out and improve their seating. It might help, it might not, but you're not going to run out of time. If the concern is running out of time, that's not going to happen. And again, we're concerned about what running a marathon in training will do for your marathon training. Because what you're doing is if you run a race 6 weeks out to improve your seating, you're running a marathon. When you've got a marathon coming
Yeah.
up, and that's going to have all the complications of the taper, the recovery, and the fatigue that you have for that. So if you've got a place and you've got a predicted time, my advice to you is stick with it and go through. Also, the batch you're in just helps you that you're not in a batch that's too fast for you, where you get dragged out by people. And that's actually the
Yeah.
biggest danger, that you end up being too far ahead in the field, and then you get dragged, everyone, and then you end up running faster than you plan to run, and then you end up hitting the wall. And we'll talk about pacing and stuff as we get closer to race day. But yeah, so that's the key thing, is that the race is done in batches. You're seeded into batches. The batches go off in waves, but your batch has 6.5. Your wave, sorry, has 6.5 hours to complete the race. So you're not going to lose
Yeah.
an hour because you started at 7:15 versus the start time of 6:15. Though it'll depend, of course. All of this stuff will be announced closer to race day. So this is just based on previous years, but it'll be a similar
Yeah.
system.
I think it's so good to know, especially for the novice runners. I think, you're not only stressed about completing the distance, but then you've got that cutoff time as well. So,
Yeah.
it's something really important to highlight. So, although, there's so much that I know you'd love to talk about through the rest, if we had more time today. But
Yeah.
just as a bit of insight, as a carry on from today into next week, for episode number 4, we'll be chatting everything about the long run. So don't fear, although we touched on it today, and Ntutu will bless us with more information next week. So going into the ins and outs of that long run, we'll also chat a little bit more about nutrition and some gear. So, and that's the gear that you wear. But anyway, yes, we do not endorse any sort of cheating. But anyway, with that, Ntutu, thank you so much for your time and all the very, very insightful information. Look forward to chatting to you next week, and enjoy the rest of your training this week.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It was great chatting you again this week, and I look forward to next week's conversation. The long run is my favorite run of the week, so I'm very, very excited to share all of that information with people, and also how you can get the most out of that very, very important session for your marathon training.
Awesome. Thanks, Ntutu. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.